Contextual what? What's up everybody, this is Scott and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't buy the Apple HomePod. This is my current iteration of what an Apple HomePod would look like if it were in my home. The Apple HomePod came out on the 9th of February, which was just a few days ago from the recording of this video, and I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't take the time or your money to buy that product right now because it has some massive flaws. But before I talk about all the massive flaws that it has, I want to give it credit because it absolutely sounds fantastic. I've watched a ton of videos on this, went to Best Buy and listened to it, and it is one of the best sounding smart speakers that I've heard in a long time. And that says a lot because I have a Google Home Max. While I think the Google Home Max sounds amazing and it's perfect for me because it has the full package of what I'm looking for, the Apple HomePod has massive flaws when in comparison to the Google Home Max, but honestly, from a music standpoint, that thing sounds amazing. The HomePod and the Google Home Max can also tune itself with its array of microphones. Same type of concept, the AI kind of pushes out the new volumes and things that it should be. Same exact thing applies, so you're going to get that whole AI smart sound speaker thing that HomePod does versus the Google Home Max. So it's really a wash when it comes to that. Again, long story short, the music sounds better in the HomePod than the Google Home Max, but not to the point where I'm willing to give up the functionality that you lose when you pick up a HomePod. Here are a list of the massive things that I just cannot get past and recommend buying a HomePod. First, if you have Apple Music, that's currently the only thing that you can use when it comes to using the HomePod with your voice. Now, you can use things like Spotify, but you can't use it using your voice. You have to use AirPlay, which, if you and I are keeping score, is specific to the Apple ecosystem. This is not a Bluetooth speaker. You cannot use this as a Bluetooth speaker. So if you do not have an iPhone or an iPad or a MacBook Pro or a MacBook at all, you can't use this at all. And that to me is a massive flaw. So again, if you have anything other than Apple Music and live in the Apple ecosystem, this is not a device that's really going to function the way that it should be out of the box for you. So it's not for me because I rock a Google Pixel 2 XL. Even though it looks great and sounds great, I can't use it, so it's just not something that's going to show up in my house. Also, the battle of the assistants. Both Siri and the Google Assistant do everything that they need to at a very, very basic level, so I'm not going to talk about the basic stuff. When it comes to complex contextual questions, the Google Assistant handles it much better than Siri. There's dozens and dozens and thousands of videos on YouTube to prove that. I don't want to belabor that point because honestly, the Google Assistant functions everything the way that I need it to. And definitely it functions in my house a lot better because again, there's some things that you can't do with the HomePod that I can do right now out of the box with the Assistant. So right out of the box, the HomePod cannot check your calendar or add events to your specific Apple calendar. In fairness to Apple, the Google Assistant couldn't do that for a while, but with Apple being so far behind in this whole getting smart devices into your home, I would have figured they would have pushed for something like that. Not necessarily a deal breaker to some because you always have your phone with you, but this very next thing is absolutely a deal breaker. Right now, out of the box, Siri cannot recognize different voices. And while that may not sound like a huge thing, let me tell you why that it is. If someone in your home says, "Read my text messages," which the HomePod can do, any of your iMessages, your child, spouse, anyone else can listen to and evoke that, meaning your text messages are read to anyone as long as they ask for it. There is no differentiation in the voice when it comes to the HomePod. Another downfall with that, they can send iMessages on your behalf because the Siri and the HomePod cannot differentiate those voices. Long story short, that means anyone inside your home that has access to your HomePod can control your messaging. That is a no-fly zone for me. Whereas the Google Assistant can recognize the different voices. Again, that's not something that it could do right out of the box, but they disable some of that functionality. The Google Assistant can't send the messages right now, but again, that's something that they had protections in place to make sure that you couldn't do that, whereas in Apple right now, you cannot do that. You can turn it off inside the HomeKit feature, but that's not something that someone's going to know right out of the box, so be very wary of the fact that people have access to your messages they can send and receive on your behalf. How about the integration piece? The Google Assistant can integrate a ton of lights. You can probably see these lights over my shoulder. I can control those with my voice. I have studio lights as well. In addition to that, I can control garage doors. There's a ton of integrations when it comes to the Google Assistant. If you go to assistant.google.com, there's over 1 million things that you can ask it. which to me pushes it far ahead of Siri and nearly to that Amazon Alexa level. And when you go to the Apple ecosystem, you are entering into a walled garden. If those items that you want to try to put into your smart home don't have the ability to use HomeKit, guess what? They're not going to be able to be controlled. One of the things that I use a lot is the fact that I can cast Netflix or Hulu or some other thing to my Chromecast in my living room for my kids to watch, or for me to watch. I watch Dashy games, I'm not above it. So I can do that right now using the Google Assistant via my phone or home, whereas I don't have the ability to do that with Siri because they just simply don't have that ability. What happens if you buy 2 HomePods? Well, right now you cannot use those 2 as stereo speakers, but you can do that with the Google Home Max. You'll eventually get to the point in Apple later this year when they said they released AirPlay 2 that you can kind of pair those things up, but that's not something that's coming out right now. That's something that's coming out later in 2018. Again, I come back to the fact that Apple is already significantly late to this game compared to Google and Amazon. Why didn't they do something like this when it comes to out of the box for folks today? So the TLDR in all of this is the fact that while it is a great sounding speaker, that's pretty much all it is if you live in the Apple ecosystem. However, if you have anything other than an Apple product, this is not something that you're going to want to spend $350 on because you just can't get that functionality. And even if you do live in the Apple ecosystem, Siri's about half-baked on the HomePod because there's some things that you just cannot do with Siri that you do on your phone versus Siri that you can do on the HomePod. Google was ripped pretty good for this, and I was definitely not a fan of the fact that I could do things on my phone versus the Assistant, and I'm not going to cut Apple any slack here too. This is a massive miss. They should have done this to make it easier for the consumers using their products. So I would save the $350. Honestly, if you want to get into the smart home stuff, start very cheap. You can get a Google Home Mini for like $40 now. You can get an Amazon Alexa Echo Dot thing for about the same price. Start there. It does work with your iPhone. That way you can kind of get into the whole smart home thing. And then you can try to figure out, give Apple some time to launch AirPlay 2 later this year. That way you can kind of see how they're going to evolve that product. It's just not ready for the prime time for $350. So save your money, buy another smart home speaker that's a little bit cheaper, and just kind of get your feet wet that way. So that's it. That's all I have, basically talking about don't buy the Apple HomePod. This is actually just a pizza box. So that's it. That's all I have. Thanks for watching. You guys are the best. Join us every Friday about 6 p.m. for our live show. We absolutely love interacting with the crowd. So come join us. Have a lot of fun. And as always, like, share, subscribe, thumbs up, leave a comment below, and we will see you next time.